Underneath the sound of laughter, there was always something else, something colder, something sharper. Before the stage lights, before the applause, Wanda Sykes had already learned how to be funny, but not because she wanted to make people laugh. She needed to keep them from looking too closely. Anger, after all, is easier to laugh at than to understand, and hers had been growing for years, quietly, patiently, like a fuse that everyone pretends isn't lit. She was a government worker once. Clean office, quiet cubicle, national security agency, the kind of job that promised safety, silence, obedience. She stayed 5 years, long enough to know what it means to be invisible in a system built to erase you, long enough to feel herself disappearing. She would leave that life behind, but the part of her that learned to play it safe, to stay quiet, didn't go away. It just followed her onto the stage. People laughed, they clapped, they quoted her jokes. They admired her timing, her delivery, her fearlessness, but what they didn't see was the cost, the exhaustion of being sharp all the time, the pressure to make the world laugh while carrying truths too heavy to say outright. Because Wanda Sykes wasn't just telling jokes, she was translating rage into rhythm, wrapping her wounds in punchlines, hiding her truth behind the sound of other people's joy. She was successful, Emmy-winning, writing for Chris Rock, performing everywhere. And yet, there was a silence inside her, a silence that grew louder every year, because no one knew she was gay. Not really. And for a long time, she told herself it didn't matter. She was private. She had her reasons, but the truth is, she was afraid, not of losing fans, of losing herself. Every time she stepped on stage and told only half the truth, she disappeared a little more. Until the silence became unbearable. Then came 2008. Proposition 8. California's attempt to ban same-sex marriage. Wanda stood at a rally in Las Vegas, surrounded by strangers, and for the first time, she said it out loud. "I'm proud to be a black woman. I'm proud to be gay." No joke, no setup, just truth. And in that moment, something broke. Or maybe it finally healed. But the reaction wasn't applause. Not from everyone. Some fans left. Some friends stayed quiet. Even in communities that had once embraced her, she was now too much, too loud, too open, too political. She had crossed the line between entertainment and honesty, and the cost was immediate, for a while. She pulled back, smiled more, softened the edges, tried to fit back into the version of herself that people preferred, but something had changed. The silence she had once used as a shield now felt like a cage, and she could no longer perform with the weight of it pressing on her chest. So she did what she had always done. She turned the pain into material. She let the rage breathe. She brought it on stage and dared people to laugh anyway. She didn't shout. She didn't beg to be understood. She let her presence do the work. She stood there, unapologetically, black, gay, sharp-tongued, and fearless, and she let the discomfort hang in the room like smoke. That was her rebellion, not the punchline, but the pause. The silence after a hard truth. When the audience didn't know whether to laugh or shift in their seats, she used that silence like a scalpel, and she carved through illusions. Her 2019 Netflix special, Not Normal, was more than a comedy set. It was a warning. It was a confession. It was a reckoning. She opened the show by telling America what it didn't want to hear. That we had stopped reacting to insanity. That we were sleepwalking through chaos and calling it Tuesday. When children are put in cages and people shrug, when the leader of the free world tweets conspiracy theories, and people scroll past, when truth sounds extreme because lies have become routine, that's not normal. And she said it, over and over. like a prayer or a slap. Some people called her angry, as if that were a weakness, as if anger, for a woman like her, wasn't survival. What they didn't understand was that anger had always been her clarity. It kept her sharp when the world tried to dull her. It kept her moving when they told her to sit down. It kept her honest when everyone else was playing along. Wanda didn't hide her fury. She refined it, turned it into heat, into fire, into something that could light a stage or burn down a lie. But rage has its price, especially when you're a woman, especially when you're black, especially when you refuse to be soft for other people's comfort. And Wanda paid it. In every headline that called her too political, in every reviewer who said she was not what comedy used to be, in every moment she felt herself shrinking again, just to be allowed back into the room. And that's the part no one talks about. The cost of truth, the fatigue of constantly standing at the edge, knowing that one misstep could be used to erase everything. She learned to carry that risk, not like a burden, but like a badge. Because once you've spoken out loud the thing that made you hide, no one can use it against you anymore. Once you've said, yes, I'm gay, yes, I'm angry, yes, I'm watching all of this and refusing to pretend it's okay, then there's nothing left for them to silence. That's where her freedom came from, not from being accepted, but from no longer needing permission. Comedy was never about making people comfortable. Not for her. It was about cracking the mask, her own, the audience's, the country's. She wasn't there to entertain. She was there to disturb the peace. Because peace built on denial isn't peace, it's performance. And Wanda had performed long enough. She knew what it meant to perform. To walk into a writer's room, one of the only black women there, and pretend the jokes didn't sting. To laugh along when someone made a comment that wasn't quite racist, but wasn't right either. To smile on cue. To be one of the guys. To stay sharp, but not threatening. To be funny, but never too real. And for a while, she played the part. Because that's what survival looked like. You learn to read the room before you read your own feelings. You learn to keep the peace, even when it costs you pieces of yourself. But there's always a price. And one day, you wake up and realize you've been translating yourself for so long. You've forgotten your original language. That's what silence does. It doesn't protect you. It erodes you, slowly, quietly, until one day, you don't recognize your own voice unless it's filtered through someone else's expectations. That's why coming out wasn't just a personal moment for Wanda. It was a revolt, not just against homophobia, but against the years of pretending, against the culture of compliance. She didn't ease into it. She didn't craft a press release. She said it in front of strangers at a rally. She didn't care if they laughed. She didn't care if they clapped. It wasn't for them. It was for her. For the version of herself that had waited too long for permission to speak. And even now, years later, you can still hear that clarity in her voice. The way she says not normal isn't just about politics. It's about the deep, slow drip of self-betrayal that happens when we adapt to dysfunction, when we smile through injustice, when we normalize absurdity because it's easier than resisting it. Wanda wasn't just pointing at a president. She was pointing at us, at the way we bend, at the way we give up tiny pieces of our outrage just to make it through the day. She refused to do that anymore. That was her shift, her alchemy. She took all the pressure, all the expectations, all the discomfort, and turned it into performance, but on her own terms. She joked about racism, parenting, politics, relationships, but beneath every laugh, there was always the echo of something deeper. A reminder that comedy isn't about escape, it's about exposure. Not running from the truth, but standing so close to it that everyone else has to see it too. And when you watch her now, there's a calm in her anger, a precision, She doesn't rant, she doesn't flail, she hits where it hurts, and she smiles while doing it. Not because it's funny, but because it's necessary. Because if she can laugh while holding her truth, maybe the rest of us can find the courage to face ours. Wanda Sykes never wanted to be anyone's symbol. She didn't ask to be a voice for the voiceless, or a banner for marginalized lives, but the world gave her two choices: be silent and safe, or be honest and alone. She chose honesty, not because it was brave, but because lying had become unbearable. There's a point when the performance cracks, when the version of yourself you've constructed to survive begins to suffocate you, and what's left underneath is raw, unfiltered, and completely inconvenient for the world around you. She was never built to fit their mold anyway. Wanda didn't soften her tone to please the mainstream. She didn't sweeten her politics to get more stage time. She wasn't there to be digestible. She was there to be heard. And sometimes, being heard means being hated, being misunderstood, being labeled difficult, hostile, divisive. But for her, those labels meant she was doing something right, because she wasn't trying to keep the peace. She was trying to name the war. The war wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was quiet, intimate, like sitting across from someone who swears they don't see color, while every part of you is screaming that they're lying, like being told we're all the same. While knowing the world doesn't treat you that way, Wanda turned those moments into material. She took the quiet insults, the coded language, the microaggressions, and made them visible. She turned polite racism into punchlines, not to downplay them, but to put them under a spotlight, because humor can be a scalpel when it's in the right hands. And Wanda's hands were steady. Her precision came from pain, yes, but also from discipline. She knew how to build a joke like a weapon: setup, tension, release. But the wound left behind wasn't accidental. She meant for you to feel it. She meant for you to laugh and flinch at the same time. Because real comedy doesn't just entertain, it disorients. It reveals. It reminds you that what you've accepted might be unacceptable. That's what Not Normal really was. Not just a title, a diagnosis, a challenge, a mirror. She wasn't just talking about Trump. She was talking about the rot underneath, the systems, the silence, the way people stopped noticing the fire because they'd been standing in smoke for too long. And her special wasn't a political statement. It was a survival story, her own and ours. Because the truth is, Wanda didn't survive by being funny. She survived by refusing to be quiet, by refusing to laugh off what was killing her, by refusing to turn her fire into something palatable. And when she finally embraced that, when she stopped trying to be anything other than exactly who she was, something shifted. Not just in her, in all of us watching. That shift wasn't loud. It didn't come with fanfare or confetti. It came in the form of stillness. A moment where she no longer felt the need to explain herself, a moment where she realized that freedom wasn't in being accepted. It was in no longer seeking approval. That's the part they don't teach you about liberation. It's quiet. It's internal. It doesn't always look like victory. Sometimes it just looks like breathing easier, like standing on a stage and knowing that every word coming out of your mouth belongs to you, and only you. For Wanda, the joke was never just a joke. It was a key, a tool, a test. She used comedy to push the boundaries of what people were willing to confront. But more than that, she used it to reclaim space for herself, for her truth, for her voice, and every time she did, she made it a little easier for someone else to do the same. That's the thing about being first. You don't get to be comfortable. You don't get to coast. You take the hits so the next person might not have to. There was never a guarantee that people would listen, or understand, or care. But she spoke anyway, because the point wasn't to win them over. The point was to stop disappearing, to stop trimming yourself down so others could feel big, to stop shrinking in rooms that were too small for your full story. And once she started telling that story, unfiltered, unpolished, unapologetic, something remarkable happened. She got funnier, not because she was trying harder, but because she was no longer hiding. There's a different kind of power that comes from truth. It makes people lean in. It makes them uncomfortable. It makes them laugh and question and rethink. And Wanda never wasted that power. She aimed it, intentionally. She took aim at hypocrisy, at injustice, at the people who said things were fine when they clearly weren't. And the brilliance of her comedy wasn't in how hard she made you laugh. It was in how long the silence lasted after the joke landed. That silence was where the lesson lived, not in the applause, in the pause. In the moment when people realized they weren't just laughing, they were recognizing themselves, their silence, their complicity, their numbness. Wanda didn't want applause for pointing that out. She wanted honesty. She wanted the kind of laughter that came from discomfort, from realization, from the shock of seeing clearly after so long in the dark. And through all of it, the backlash, the labels, the nights where the silence was louder than the laughs, she kept going, not out of spite, but out of purpose, because she understood something most people don't, that being real is always riskier than being liked, but it's the only way to live without regret. Wanda Sykes didn't just master comedy, she mastered herself, and that's a different kind of triumph. It's not measured in ticket sales or Emmy wins, though she had both. It's measured in how much of yourself you're willing to bring to the surface, how much of your truth you'll risk putting in front of strangers, how many layers you're willing to peel away before there's nothing left but the truth, raw and exposed. And still, you choose to stand there anyway. That's what made her different. She didn't crave the spotlight. She used it, not to shine on herself, but to illuminate what others tried to keep hidden: racism, homophobia, cowardice masked as tradition, the slow, numbing normalization of cruelty. Wanda didn't come to make people feel good. She came to make them feel, and that's much harder. She didn't always know that's what she was doing. In the early days, comedy was a mask, a defense mechanism, like many comedians. She found laughter in pain, but over time, the mask grew thin. The laughs felt hollow when they weren't tethered to truth. And the more she tried to protect people's comfort, the more she lost touch with her own. There's a moment every performer dreads, the one where they no longer recognize the version of themselves they've created to be liked. And Wanda hit that wall hard, but instead of retreating, she did what most won't. She turned back. She asked herself the hard questions, and she rewrote the rules of who she was allowed to be. She stopped editing her voice for the room. She stopped asking herself, "Will they like this?" and started asking, "Is this honest?" And the answer changed everything. Her comedy grew sharper, more precise. But more than that, it grew freer. Because once you've faced the worst fear that being fully yourself might make people leave, you start to see who actually stays, who listens, who gets it. That clarity is a gift, but it's earned through loss, through risk, through nights when the room goes cold. Not because the joke failed, but because the truth hit too hard. Wanda took those nights and wore them like armor. They didn't break her. They built her. And what emerged wasn't just a comedian, it was a woman in full. No edits, no apologies, no performance. She still makes people laugh. Yes, but that's not the point anymore. The point is what comes after the laugh, the pause, the reckoning, the moment when the crowd goes quiet, because they've just seen something real, maybe for the first time all day. That's the legacy. Not the laughs, the clarity, the discomfort that becomes a doorway, the rage that becomes revelation, the truth that once spoken, refuses to be unspoken. She taught us that being angry doesn't make you broken. It makes you aware. It means you still notice the cracks in the system, the lies we're expected to swallow, the masks we're told to wear. In a world obsessed with fake smiles and polished optics, Wanda's refusal to dilute her fury was an act of defiance. But more than that, it was an act of healing, because anger, when held with care, when spoken with clarity, becomes something else. It becomes fuel, direction, vision. Wanda turned hers into a compass. Not toward fame, she already had that. Not toward power, she didn't want it. Toward truth. The kind of truth that makes people uncomfortable. The kind that challenges the room. The kind that sometimes makes the room leave. She accepted that, because losing the crowd was always better than losing herself. There's something brutal about that choice, about knowing you could be richer, more famous, more universally adored if you just said less, smiled more, took the edge off. But Wanda never chased ease. She chased honesty. And honesty doesn't always pay up front. Sometimes it costs everything. But what it gives you if you survive it is peace. The peace of standing in your own skin without shame. The peace of knowing that even if the world doesn't clap, you didn't lie to get here. And in a career built on timing, perhaps that was Wanda's most impeccable rhythm, knowing exactly when to stop pretending, when to draw the line, when to drop the act and speak, not for the joke, but for the soul. And it's not just about her. It never was. That's the trick of real art. It looks personal, but it holds up a mirror to everyone else. Wanda's journey didn't just reveal Wanda. It revealed us, our cowardice, our silence, our tendency to label difficult women as angry, and angry women as dangerous, our fear of truth, unless it's sugar-coated. She exposed all of it, not by pointing fingers, by telling her story, unfiltered, and letting us sit with what we saw in it. And the irony is, she's never been more relevant, because the world is still trying to gaslight us into silence, still telling us to laugh at the absurd instead of confront it, still normalizing the inexcusable, dressing up dysfunction as tradition. But now, thanks to voices like Wanda's, fewer people are laughing, more are asking questions, more are refusing to smile on cue. That's the real power, not the punchline. The aftertaste. The echo of something true that lingers long after the show ends. The way her voice stays in your head days later. Not because it was loud, but because it was right. Because it said what you didn't have the words for yet. That's what she gave us. Not just comedy, not even just courage. She gave us permission to be angry, to be loud, to be complicated, to be whole. And in giving us that permission, she claimed it for herself. That was the final transformation. The freedom not just to speak, but to exist without explaining. To live without translating every part of herself for comfort. That's what the journey gave her. That's what she earned through every loss, every silence, every moment on stage where the room didn't quite know what to do with her truth. She stopped needing them to know. She stopped asking them to keep up. Because when you strip away the roles, the expectations, the applause, all that's left is whether you recognize yourself when the lights go out. Wanda Sykes does. Fully, fiercely, finally. Her comedy now doesn't chase the laugh. It challenges the listener. There's nothing soft about it, nothing neat, because the world isn't neat. Justice isn't soft, and truth isn't polite. She isn't trying to make the pain go away. She's trying to make sure it's seen, named, understood. That's a different kind of healing, a deeper one, and for those still pretending, still performing, still playing small to fit inside someone else's comfort zone. Her story isn't just relatable, it's confrontational. It dares you to ask, What am I hiding behind? Who would I be if I stopped asking for permission? Because Wanda didn't escape the cost. She just decided the price of silence was higher. She lost people. She was labeled. She was misunderstood. But she kept showing up, kept telling the joke, kept saying the thing no one else would. Until her voice wasn't just a career, it was a path. For others. For the ones who didn't know they were allowed to exist as they are. For the ones still pretending. And that's what this has always been about. Not a stand-up special. Not politics. Not even identity. It's about choosing truth over comfort. Anger over silence. Wholeness over approval. And that choice is one you make every day. In rooms where people want you quiet. In moments where shrinking feels safer. In the space between who you are and who they want you to be, Wanda Sykes made her choice. And she made it out loud. Not to be liked. To be free. Because freedom is not the absence of struggle. It's the refusal to be silenced by it. And when the lights fade, when the crowd leaves, when the jokes are done, echoing what's left is the truth. Wanda Sykes told hers, "Now it's your turn. Your